Hello to you all and welcome to another instalment of ThePitCast by us here at The Pit Crew Online. From the fans, for the fans. On this week's episode, we come ready to discuss the Azerbaijan Grand Prix and the thrilling conclusion which resulted in Checo Perez taking his second career victory and his first for Red Bull. I am your host, Adam Wheeler, resident IndyCar editor at The Pit Crew Online. And joining me today are two guests. One who saw fit to see through James and I's fantasy league conversations last week, and you gave us a second chance, so thank you. It is, of course, our Formula One contributor, Jess. How you doing?
Hello, I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, yeah, good. It was funny because you were on for the first time as a debutant on the Monaco Grand Prix, and now I'm
back.
Now you're back, but it seemed like there wasn't a lot to talk about for that. Now, this is like the polar opposite for this race. This seems to be, it's turned on its head. This was a monster race.
Yeah, this is going to be fun. If we manage to get it in the same day, it's going to be a bit of a miracle, but I'm excited to talk about it. I really am.
Okay. And also joining us is another debutant on the PitCast, someone who has been contributing to our race weekend F1 content. I'd like to welcome Luke to the PitCast. Luke, first of all, how are you? And second of all, could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I'm very well, thanks, Adam. Thank you. Yeah, my name's Luke. I've been a Formula One fan for, I think it was about 20 years ago. I remember stumbling across qualifying for the Monaco Grand Prix, and there was just something good about the red car at the front trying to beat the silver cars, and really been hooked ever since. But yeah, big Formula One fan. Do some commentary and various things on the F1 games in my spare time. Driving, though, probably not my forte. As Kimi Räikkönen said, he should stick to the reporting stuff.
And, you never know, Luke. Maybe in a couple of years' time, we'll see you on the Channel 4 commentary team. Maybe? Is that a bit optimistic at this point?
I mean, who knows? Who knows if I'll make some weird cockerel sounding noise as well when drivers go off? But I'm sure we'll talk about that later.
That I was going to mention that, but we'll save it for a little bit and park that to the side. But thanks, Luke. But before we dive in, if you're new to the channel, please like this video and subscribe, whether you're viewing this on YouTube or Spotify. We're very grateful to those of you who have been tuning in to our midweek ramblings, and as we mentioned last week, we really do want to grow our audience through this season, so your ongoing support will be greatly appreciated. But guys, Baku never seems to fail. Pretty much since 2017, since Daniel Ricciardo won from P10 or something like that, I can't genuinely remember a bad race from Baku. Let's start with Luke.
Yeah, I think it's, I've now got it as Crazy Baku 3, Boring Baku 2, 2017, 2018. 2019 was a bit dull. 2016, not much happened as well. But this year's race, for the first 30 laps, we were thinking, it's a pretty standard modern Formula One race. But then Stroll's incident, everything seemed to kick off after that. And I think it could be a race that could be a massive turning point in the championship, maybe not just for the ones that you'd obviously think.
Yeah, massive race for the championship. A lot of people who could have got a lot of points, a lot of people who were in contention for the championship didn't score points, but we'll get onto that in a second. It did, though, Jess, as Luke said, convince us that it might be a bit of a straightforward one, because we went a while without yellow flags and without safety cars, as we said, before Lance Stroll's off. It fooled us, didn't it?
It really did. I was sitting there watching it, ready to settle in for a Monaco style. We'll just watch them all go round and it'll be nice. We'll get a winner at the end and it'll be very interesting for the championship, because at the time Max was in the lead. So yeah, it definitely fooled me, that's for sure. And then I was very surprised when all of a sudden there was a green car with only two wheels. It was definitely interesting.
It was very interesting. And so let's just start off with, I guess, where can't we not start off? There were so many different tangents, and we were just saying beforehand, there's just so much to talk about. But let's just start off with the two championship contenders. Lewis Hamilton led early after passing shock pole sitter Charles Leclerc, but Verstappen jumped him easily enough, actually, through the pit stop sequence. Jess, did Hamilton and Mercedes really have a chance of staying ahead in a straight fight with Verstappen and Red Bull?
I think potentially not. I think it was a 60-40 in the way of Red Bull winning, I would say, but only because it's sort of their sort of circuit. I think that with the engine change and stuff, Mercedes clearly knew that they either needed the extra power. I mean, maybe they just did it that way because the engines split up nicer that way, but they probably felt like they needed the extra power. So to me, I think even with that extra 2 seconds on his pit stop, I think it would have been an interesting battle. And had Lewis won, it would have been a great fight between the two of them. But I think it was Red Bull's to win, with Max, as I thought, to start with.
Yeah, Max was in imperative form. Wouldn't you agree, Luke?
Yeah, definitely. It was a fantastic race from Max. I'd say the start went perfectly for Lewis. He got Leclerc in between Max and himself. And I think as long as Charles Leclerc had that DRS, it was always going to be tough for Max to make the overtake. One slight mistake, dropped out. Max got the move done. And yeah, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened if Gasly hadn't have got in the way in the pit stops. That was the thing. Mercedes being the first car in the pits, have to wait for anyone else who is coming in. So that did cost them. But let's not forget Perez didn't have a perfect pit stop. And there's very well a chance that if Perez would have had a better stop, he could have come out ahead of Verstappen. But it's the first time we've really seen two Red Bulls versus one Mercedes. We've become so accustomed to seeing Hamilton and Bottas taking on Verstappen, who's having to fight it off on his own. And the roles were reversed for the first time. And it did look like it was going to end up with the Red Bull 1-2.
Yeah, and ultimately, had Lewis finished in third behind the Red Bulls, that would have been, it would have been a pretty good save considering how they were looking after FP3. They were looking down and out. They were looking, washed out. They seemed like they didn't have any pace. But that decision by Mercedes to put on the low downforce rear wing in qualifying just seemed to save Lewis's weekend. And really committing to that approach, that allowed him to qualify higher than it looked on the cards. So actually, they played a blinder there, possibly risking Valtteri's car in the process, because we know that they were trying different things and they were trying different setups throughout the weekend. But yeah, that setup choice and that rear wing choice was a real interesting decision by Mercedes, wasn't it, Jess?
Yeah, although I did see, it was interesting in general watching them over the weekend, trying to figure out what they were going to do to get a performance out of the car. It was interesting to see them on the back foot like that. But they did, I think I saw an interview, I think it was with Toto. I think it was with Toto. And he said that actually it was driver preference. So Lewis preferred that wing compared to Valtteri. And I think, to be fair to Valtteri, I think he did get a little bit caught out with the red flag at the end of Q3. I think he was definitely on for a faster lap. But it sounded to me like it was potentially more driver preference than that he just didn't get the right wing. But it was definitely interesting to watch them essentially try and find their performance all weekend.
But while Lewis was trailing behind Perez, it didn't really seem like he had the capability to really push Perez. I mean, he was staying behind him, but he just could never make the overtake. And this was one of the things that I found a little bit strange throughout that first part of the race before Lance Stroll was off. It just seemed like we were just kept in limbo for about 30 or so laps. I was just waiting for that overtake to happen, but it just never did. And I wonder, if that's, how much that says or speaks volumes about Red Bull's development, or whether that just says, it's a track-specific circuit for them, or whether it says this is a potential shift in the championship, or where we're seeing Red Bull finally take it to Mercedes. Luke, do you see any interesting development there in terms of either car's performance?
I'm going to be honest, if you'd asked me before practice who I thought was going to come out on top this weekend, I'd have gone for Mercedes. I thought the long straights would have suited their car and their package more. Obviously, Honda have made great strides and are bringing an update, I believe, to the next race, and we might see even better straight line performance from them. And I think I think going back to the wing changes, I think Hamilton went for the lower downforce wing because he thought, I might be qualifying quite far down here. I'm going to need to do some overtaking. I think he might have been thinking, I'm going to have McLarens, Ferraris, and who knows what else to try and fight my way up through the field against. Let's have lower downforce to get ahead of those. And obviously, stuck in the dirty air, Mercedes has been a car that we've seen before does not like being behind another car. Formula One cars are designed to be ahead of everyone. And that low downforce in the middle sector just cost him. He couldn't get close enough at any point to Perez. It wasn't like it was a fantastic straight line advantage from the Red Bull. It's just that Lewis was always about 8 or 9 tenths behind Sergio by the time he was coming onto the main straight and couldn't make up the gap.
Let's move ahead a little bit to the 2-lap dash at the end. Luke, we had this unprecedented 2-lap dash from the standing start, the red flag, which, actually from that sort of limbo-y moment of the race, it turned it on its head. Those who watch the Channel 4 coverage, like we briefly mentioned, will have seen Mark Webber's reaction to the following scene. Luke, Hamilton started second and was attacking Perez into the first corner when it went spectacularly wrong for him.
Yeah, I don't think it could have got worse for him. It's just hit the magic button. And unfortunately, on this occasion, it was the wrong magic button. And as soon as I saw him go straight on, I was thinking he's had a brake failure. His brakes were smoking beforehand. They were clearly very hot. I was thinking there's been a brake failure. His fronts have locked up. He's got no rear braking here. And as it turns out, he didn't have any rear braking, but that was an accidental choice that he'd made, flicked a switch. I saw a photo earlier today that said he'd put the brake bias onto something like 85% forward. So those front brakes, it was never going to get the car stopped, and he probably completely flat spotted that set of tyres that he'd just put on, and it must have been absolutely gutting because he'd got this opportunity. He was ahead. He had the inside line. He'd got his entire car ahead. He would have took that lead into turn one, and I think would have been very difficult to be overtaken by Perez. And it would have been another race where Hamilton sort of snatches victory from the jaws of defeat, a bit like in 2018 where Bottas got the puncture at Azerbaijan. So he must have been absolutely gutted. It shows how complicated Formula One cars are. I think Lewis Hamilton spoke about when he joined Mercedes, Michael Schumacher had way more buttons on the steering wheel and he couldn't get used to it. And I wouldn't be surprised if at the next race, that magic switch is in a slightly different place on that steering wheel. If it's happened once, it can happen again.
Well, I mean, I already know from personal experience that I already struggle with a PS4 controller, let alone an F1 controller or a steering wheel for that matter. But Jess, what was your reaction to seeing Lewis Hamilton go veering off into turn one?
I mean, firstly, it was utter shock. Although with his brakes smoking, I wasn't expecting them to. Like Luke, I just assumed that they had failed in the immediate. And I was really shocked to see it because you rarely see a mistake from him. I mean, he is consistent. He is, in my head, he's like Mr. Consistent. And he lost his, 54 race points scoring streak. I actually screamed at my TV. I was not quite to the levels of Mr. Webber, but I did scream at my TV. My first thought was, oh my God, what's just happened? My second thought was, how crazy is this race? My third thought was, it's going to be really good for the championship because we've now got a straight fight and no difference from last week.
Yeah. And
then it was, Perez is in the lead. The second Red Bull has just picked up the pieces, but in a incredible way. He did the work for that, and he totally deserved that win. But he did, because Perez wasn't leading into turn one, or I didn't think he was anyway, because Hamilton had the inside line. And then the rest of the 2 laps, what I was doing is I was sitting on my bed and I was leaning forward closer and closer towards my TV. Waiting. I nearly fell into it, I'll be honest.
It's that meme, isn't it? It's that meme of the person sitting upright and then just slowly leaning forward. I think that was everyone across the country.
Exactly.
I've seen loads where it's showing the turn one incident and then everyone in the pub with the England World Cup scenes where everyone's just cheering as he's going off. I didn't quite share that sentiment. I was a bit scutted about it, but it was no doubt an unbelievable moment. And Hamilton was kind of kicking himself afterwards, wasn't he? Like any driver would be. He was really down and out, given that he'd lost an opportunity really to capitalize on something, a misfortune that happened to Max. Obviously, that Verstappen, while he was down, maybe he was a little less down than he would have been had Hamilton finished second or first and opened up a big championship lead. So it's kind of, it's ended up a race that could have been significant in the championship, whatever happened, either Hamilton getting a lot of points, Verstappen getting a lot of points. It's now just cancelled all of that out, and it's just basically back to the drawing board. So, it almost doesn't matter. It's like one of those kind of, let's just enjoy what the podium was, and let's enjoy that, and let's move on back to the championship fight in a couple of weeks' time. But let's move on to the tyre failures. So Verstappen's rear left failed. That was on a set of hards that were completing their 34th lap. Earlier, Lance Stroll had, I think, one that put him in the wall on their 30th lap, I think, or they were finishing their 30th lap. So what on earth happened there, Luke?
I don't know. And I think more worryingly for Formula One, I'm not sure Pirelli knows either. That rear left tyre, they've admitted it's the tyre that takes the least hammering around that circuit. It's an anti-clockwise circuit, unusually for street circuits, because there's some high-speed sections, it's fairly front limited. So that rear left is just cruising along at a lot of corners. They've used the debris explanation, and Max Verstappen did say Pirelli are going to blame debris, and it is very possible. I'm wondering, though, if a bit like Silverstone 2013, was there a sharp curve anywhere, maybe turn 15, turn 16, and then it's failing on the straight? Because there was, unusually for Baku, there was no lap one, turn one incident. I can't remember anyone getting any damage to their car that would cause debris, because we know carbon fibre shreds these tyre to pieces. So maybe even the Baku organisers have got something to look out. Was there something out on track that just caused cuts to Verstappen, Stroll's, and also Hamilton's tyre when they took it off after the red flag period? His hard tyres did have a cut in them.
That's quite an interesting point. There wasn't really any significant crashes on the start-finish straight throughout the weekend. It was mostly at turn 15, as we all saw in qualifying and for the free practice sessions. Jess, do you believe, or do you share this sort of skepticism that it was made by debris, or do you agree with that? Do you think it was caused by debris?
I think Max's can be explained by debris more than Stroll's, only because Stroll had his incident on the straight, and it's potentially that Max picked up debris from him if it wasn't cleared away properly. But I'm not sure about Stroll, because we've had this issue before, and they went one step softer than normal this time, and in comparison to Monaco. So I think there's the potential there that it did fail. I think because we've had previous, like last year, we had the tyres going at Silverstone as well. Although they were essentially the right ones, if you see what I mean. They were the correct ones. But
don't remind me of that race. That was catastrophic for me and my Sainz fandom. And seeing him drop from P4 out of the race, it made me cry. But go on, Jess. You've just reminded me of that.
That one was so intense. It made me actually maybe I scream at the TV every Formula One race. I don't know, but that one made me scream at the TV too. I'm not sure. I think had it just been Stroll's, I would be 100%. Well, not 100%, but I would be mostly. This is potentially a tyre failure, but because Max has happened as well, it does make me think it's potentially linked to debris, because Max potentially picked up his debris from Stroll, and Stroll could have picked it up from 15. It just would shock me that they had absolutely no warning, as Red Bull said, they had absolutely no warning, and then it just went. And that, I don't know, that's different. The FIA Team Radio Red Bull thing, it sort of confused me. It confused me in terms of the message. The fact that Red Bull said we need a red flag so that everyone can change their tyres, that could have hurt their own race with Perez, because it gave Hamilton the chance to change his. I mean, in the end, it was fine, but I'm not sure. I'm sort of on the fence.
Well, I mean, whatever happened, there's going to be a thorough investigation, I'm sure. There always usually is. They come up with an official report of what happened and implement some subtle changes. I know they were thinking of changing the tyre compounds from this year, and they may look into doing so in the future, but we will see. It certainly was interesting to see Lance Stroll as one of the biggest talking points 2 weeks in a row, going from his amazing highlight reel from Crofty's cutaway from the F1 directors in Monaco to now his spectacular crash in Baku. I'm not quite ready to keep seeing Lance Stroll on my Twitter feed for 3 weeks in a row. But let's move on swiftly to who finished on the podium this weekend. I want to take a moment to give a massive credit to Sergio Perez. This was a man who about a third of a season ago didn't have a seat in Formula One, or at least he didn't have a contract for the following season. And most people had written him off. But, let's not sugarcoat this. The man has won 2 times since that point with 2 different teams. And I think this is just incredible. And I think it goes to show that we shouldn't write drivers off, really. And I think that we should appreciate those who are doing good things in the midfield, because some of them are worthy to be in top teams, just never have been given the right opportunity, or maybe were given the opportunity in Perez's case. And he's just developed and developed and developed into such a classy operator. But yeah, I mean, Jess, let's start with you. What a drive from Perez.
It was incredible. I think even from the first round of pit stops, he had more life in his tyres, and so did Max. They were both driving around doing fastest laps after Hamilton went in the pits, but he worked hard enough and raced those tyres hard enough, or managed them appropriately. And we all know Perez is very good at managing his tyres. He managed them enough that he was able to get the jump on Hamilton, essentially. And he played, apart from the fact that he appears to be a very good team player within the Red Bull camp, he just drove a good race, and he did essentially what the second seat of that Red Bull was supposed to be doing for the last couple of years. Now, I don't mean that in a bad way. I'm very much a fan of Alex Albon and Pierre Gasly. But I think Perez has shown his experience in that he has managed to take the wheel of that car and develop it to a point where he is comfortable, and now playing the team game really well and picking up a win when the team really needed it. That win was really, really important for the Constructors' Championship. So yeah, I think it was a really solid drive for the whole race, not just like the last bit where he was in the lead, the whole thing.
Luke, do you share that sentiment?
Yeah, and I think Gasly and Albon can maybe look at him for inspiration. Just because you've been dropped by a big team once, it's not game over. Let's not forget 2013, Sergio Perez had the chance at McLaren, didn't do fantastically against Button. The car wasn't great, and we thought that was probably it for him in a big team. He'd been at Force India / Racing Point ever since. It was by far his best race of the season. Pace-wise, he was within 2/10 a second every single lap of Verstappen. His fantastic ability to keep hold of those Pirelli tyres is definitely helping out. I do think the Mercedes is a kinder car to those Pirelli tyres, and that's what cost them perhaps at Monaco when they couldn't get the tyres heated up. But yeah, he did a fantastic job. He said, "Judge me after 5 races," and he's gone out and won race 6. So you can't ask for too much more than that. And it'll be interesting to see how he does for the rest of the season. He might need to improve his qualifying slightly more. He didn't get it right on his first lap, and we saw the red flag for the second qualifying in a row. So that could have been potentially more costly than he was, but he had a fantastic start to the race. Brilliant pace. Already mentioned, if it wasn't for a bad pit stop, he could have even taken the lead. And this could just be the confidence boost he needs to go on for the rest of the season. Probably not for a championship challenge. I can't see Red Bull wanting that, but you'd have to say he's favourite to finish third.
Yeah, I think the Mexican fans would be chomping at the bits for that, for a championship push. He's just ticking all the boxes, isn't he? He's backing up Verstappen. He's given them a second car in the fight. And all right, it's just one race. We can't always judge people on one good race, but I think there's been a consistency with Perez. All right, maybe the odd bit and slip here and there, but genuinely, he's just been there or thereabouts, just trying to push the team forward. And I think what is most significant is contribute to the Constructors' Championship, which is the thing that they've been missing for the past couple of years. But anyway, there's so much to talk about. Honestly, we could have basically 2 hours to talk about this manic race. But moving on to the next spot on the podium, let's talk a little bit about Sebastian Vettel. He obviously ran longer into the race, took advantage on fresher tyres at the end of the race on the likes of Leclerc and Gasly, and finishing second. His first podium with Aston Martin. Luke, were you as pleased as I was?
I was, yeah. 2 top 5 finishes in a row. And I think with as well, Alonso getting some good points and Raikkonen getting his first point of the season. It was sort of the old boys of Formula One sort of showing that they can still perform on the Sundays. But yeah, another fantastic performance from Sebastian. He seems to be able to eke something extra out of those soft tyres for just that bit longer. Obviously, started in 11th place. He was annoyed to miss out on Q3 because of the red flag, but gets the free tyre advantage. And yeah, a brilliant job. Maybe because of that fresher tyre advantage as well. When the safety car came in, he was on fresher hard tyres and put moves instantly on Leclerc and Gasly. But yeah, another fantastic performance. I think it just goes to show what confidence can do for a driver. And it's also interesting how Aston Martin's last two races, they've begun to show some more form, just as Mercedes have started to drop off, even though they're on basically the same design philosophy. Some would even say the same design, full stop.
Yeah. Jess, how did you find that?
Yeah, I mean, he had such a good race. He just, I don't know. I think it struck me when, I don't know whether it was an Aston Martin strategy or whether it was something that he called on, because I think Lance Stroll did something similar as well. But when everyone made their stop and he was in the lead, which I was sort of like, oh, he's back. He was in the lead and he was pulling a gap, but he was doing it so that when he did his pit stop, he pulled a gap on his main rivals, which is something similar to what he did in Monaco. And I think that kind of strategy, that shows his experience. And that in itself, I was very pleased with the podium, and I think he totally deserved one, whether it had been third, second, or whatever. But I think that period where he was doing that, he really showed his experience, and he really showed that he was back on form. And like Luke said, his confidence was back. He had been completely knocked in last year in the Ferrari, and I think he's back. We saw it before in the Red Bull when he switched to Ferrari. He wasn't enjoying himself particularly, and then he went to Ferrari and he had a new lease of life. And I think we're seeing that again now that he's used to the car again. I think we're seeing that again, and I'm pleased for him, because I think he deserves a few more podiums than he maybe got with Ferrari. So yeah, I think this race really showed his skill.
Yeah, and with that, Vettel actually extends his active podium streak to 14 seasons, which I think a lot of people weren't expecting him to almost get at Aston Martin. But it's just great to see the old Vettel back. It's good to see that resurgent success, and I just hope that we can see a really good fight in the future with Lance Stroll and Vettel, and maybe at the sharper end of the midfield. We know that obviously the rake of that Aston Martin has severely affected its performance over the season. Who knows? Maybe 2022, Vettel will be there at the sharp end, facing it off with Gasly, with Tsunoda, maybe with the McLarens or with Ferraris. Who knows what's going to happen? But let's now talk about a bit of Pierre Gasly, who's making yearly podiums a bit of a thing at the moment. Talking about active podium streaks, Gasly's on three years with 3 podiums. And I think the only other person to do that is Sainz outside of Verstappen, Bottas, Vettel, and Hamilton, who have a lot more than that, of course. But Gasly had a great start. He had a great qualifying. We'll put it there. He started in P4 when nobody expected him to do. He got a great toe on his Q3 lap. But yeah, just drove an absolutely brilliant race. He was there at the end. He pushed Charles Leclerc. We saw them two fighting it out, dicing it out at the end of the race, which is brilliant because they're two great pals and we know how much they respect each other. And it was good to see them, not crash. It was good to see them give them a little bit of respect. Jess, how did you rate Gasly's race?
I think that AlphaTauri is a lot faster than last year. It's definitely improved in different areas of performance than it did last year. And I think, talk about another man who's got confidence on his side. He's slowly building up his confidence since his departure from Red Bull. And he's got momentum now. He's clearly happy in that AlphaTauri team. They suit him, he suits them, and I think he's just solid. He's also turning into, I think, a good leader for that team. With Tsunoda in the other car, I think he'll be a good role model for him. Apart from the fact that he's, had a comeback and stuff, he clearly knows how to drive that car. I mean, they all do, but they clearly know how to drive that car. And yeah, he's getting the results to prove it. And he's just a man with confidence. And as we said about Vettel, it just does wonders for them. It's very much a mental game, is a physical. And I think, he now has confidence, and he so deserved that podium because it was such a good race for him.
Luke, how do you sum up Gasly's race?
He's had a fantastic race, obviously, and I think he's had a really good season. He just didn't get the results in the first 2 races. Had really good qualifying. The collision with Ricciardo, I believe it was in Bahrain, and then going on the wet tyres at Imola turned out to be the wrong choice. As you said, race 3 and 4 of the season, it looked like the car had dropped off, but a bit like Vettel, put in a brilliant performance at Monaco. Obviously, managed to stop Lewis Hamilton doing the undercut, which I think we all thought at Monaco was going to be the right strategy. And just kept himself out of trouble on Sunday, got himself rewarded with a podium. A fantastic performance from him. And let's not forget Yuki Tsunoda. He's had a bit of a confidence knock over the last few races. I'm currently considering whether I need to leave Milton Keynes and move to Faenza, whether my work performance would increase all of a sudden.
Well, I mean, I was joking with James that, how has he been taken to Faenza? I kind of imagine him being like kidnapped in the middle of the night with like put a little bag over his head and just shipped off into a helicopter. Off he goes to Faenza. See you later. And he wakes up in some penthouse with Franz Tost. It was a funny story, but I think we see with drivers that, especially with people like Sainz, who moved to McLaren in Britain in order to move closer to the team, in order to integrate himself with the team, we saw immediate success. And then he did exactly the same thing with Ferrari, trying to integrate further with Ferrari, move closer to there, move closer to Maranello, have a closer relationship with the engineers. It's working there. And I think possibly the same thing will happen to Tsunoda. He had a good race. He had a really good race. And, I think he's one of those drivers out of maybe 3, 4, 5 who we could all touch on, who had sort of really good under the radar races. And I think we can touch a little bit on those in a second. Before we get onto our driver of the days, there is way too much to talk about, and I know we're going to run out of time. So I'm just going to quickly do a little signpost and say, bad day for Ferrari, started on pole, should have done a little bit better considering that, and didn't even finish on the podium. And slightly bad day, as we've mentioned, for Bottas and Ricciardo. But let's move quickly on to our drivers of the day. So guys, this is your moment to say who you think deserves this, or maybe it's your opportunity to shed a light on someone else who we haven't talked about. Let's go with Jess. Who is your driver of the day? Who are you going to say?
Overall, I agreed with the poll. My driver of the day was Vettel because he just had such a solid race. Well, it was between Vettel and Perez, but Vettel definitely deserved it. I think, though, like Alonso deserved a shout out because he, on that restart, if you watched his onboard of the restart, his experience was there. You could see it written all over that restart. And he just didn't crash with anyone. He took a few places and So Alonso, and then potentially Giovinazzi as well, I think deserves a shout out, just because I noted that he managed to make up 5 places on the proper actual start of the race. He made up 5 places on the first lap, and had it not been for the fact that he came into the pits, he potentially would have got much higher. I think those 2 definitely deserved a shout out, but for me, the overall driver of the day was Vettel.
Luke, who's your driver of the day?
I think just to be a bit different, I mean, maybe it's a bit of a boring choice, but I'm going to go for the race winner, even without the incidents that happened that ended up giving him the victory. Sergio Perez drove an absolutely fantastic race. He kept a 7-time world champion behind him for, 10, 15 laps under constant pressure, and never looked like cracking. The only time you could even say he maybe put a tiny foot wrong was on the restart after the red flag when he didn't get the best getaway. But in the end, didn't really matter. Snatched another victory. And I think, a bit like we've said earlier, this could be a turning point for him.
Yeah, and I guess if I have to pick one, I think we've had Perez, we've had Alonso, we had so many drivers. I mean, we haven't really spoken or waxed lyrical that much about Verstappen. I mean, he drove such a good race, and I think it was so unfortunate for him to crash out in that way that he did. I kind of want to lean towards giving a bit of praise to him, but I think saying that, I think I've got to give it to Vettel as well. So I'm going to have to be a bit boring and join you, Jess. But so sorry about that. But thank you, guys. So obviously, we're going to be looking forward to the French Grand Prix in a couple of weeks' time. Are you guys looking forward to anything in particular in the next couple of weeks? Luke?
I was hoping that the French Grand Prix might actually get the double header and experiment with a different layout, because they can do, I think it's 160 plus at Paul Ricard, and the one that they've got now just doesn't seem to work for Formula One. Maybe it's worth turning the sprinklers on at that circuit, because the 2018 and 2019 races haven't exactly been classics, but I think it's a race Mercedes need to win. If Red Bull take the victory there, then they've done it on street circuits, they've done it on a more normal circuit, and Mercedes will start to get worried for this championship.
Yeah. I'm really looking forward to this supposed outing for Romain Grosjean around that time as well, where he gets that test in the Mercedes. He was supposedly supposed to have a running at the French Grand Prix. I'm not quite sure if that's happening now due to a bit of conflict with IndyCar as well, but I do think they still got that test, that private test, and hopefully we see a little bit of news and see some videos over social media, because that will just be a good story overall to see that happen. Jess, what are you looking forward to in the next couple of weeks on the run up to the French Grand Prix?
Well, I'm looking forward to the interesting words that were had between Toto and Christian in the media being extended. That'd be interesting.
That was interesting. Didn't he tell him to shut up effectively, in some way? There was this weird spat going on between them. What happened there?
It was very interesting. Christian did an interview and basically cited Toto. Toto did an interview and said that Christian was a windbag and just like talking to people. And yeah, it was very kind of like a school fight kind of thing, where words were said but nothing actually happened. So it will also be interesting to see if anything comes out of the investigate. I don't know if it was investigation, but it'll be interesting to see if anything comes out of the sensors that the FIA had on all of the rear wings. If I don't know if they're going to do an investigation into that, but it would be interesting to see if something does come of that, if either of the two teams were correct in whatever it was they were saying. I'm not entirely sure if I'm looking forward to the French Grand Prix, but I am.
What's wrong with the French Grand Prix, Jess? What?
It's not my favourite. No, I'm sure it'll be. I'll probably have to eat my words next time and be like, oh yeah, it was the best Grand Prix ever or something. Now that I've said that, but I am, like Luke said, I'm interested to see how Mercedes are going to sort of head into it, because it is a must-win race for them at the moment, because they've lost 2 on the bounce and quite heavily for them. So yeah, it will be interesting to see what happens there, I think.
And I think it's also going to be very interesting to see the Drive to Survive episode of Azerbaijan. That's just going to be, whether it's the spat between the two principals or whether it's looking at Hamilton, I want to see that straight away. That's one of the first episode I'm going to watch, is the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. But I think there's nothing left to say other than thank you all for listening. And I think we should also wrap this up by just briefly mentioning about the unfortunate and tragic passing of Mansour, who was one of McLaren shareholders and beloved members of McLaren back during the obviously Ron Dennis days of the organization. It was publicly announced during the race weekend and had a moment of memorial during the run up to the race. So I guess everyone here at the Pit Crew Online just wants to extend a heartfelt condolences and thinking about his friends and families during this time. But saying that, let's wrap this up. So if you all enjoyed this and want to find more content, make sure to like and subscribe, and look out for us on Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, and Spotify, or visit our website at www.thepitcrewonline.net. Also, a special thank you to Luke and Jess for joining us. Guys, where can our listeners find you on social media? Jess?
So I'm on Twitter. It's at TMotorsportGirl. Stands for That Motorsport Girl.
Brilliant. And Luke, where can we find you on social media, mate?
I'm on Twitter at Luke Etheridge 95.
Brilliant. And that's it for another episode of the PitCast. So as always, we will see you out on track.